Testing, testing. All right, technical difficulties. A bunch of rookies here, starting with this guy up front. So thank you, Eric and Michael. So again, just welcome to everybody. Welcome to the online viewers. It's great to be here tonight. It's an honor to be asked to come up and share, with any message, the communion message and stuff, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. But it's just an honor to have the opportunity to share things. It's not to have it all together, but hopefully, as we go through the material tonight, I'm going to talk about honor in the workplace and just share some of my experiences and things, testimony, and just some of the notes that I've put together. I've had a little time to work on this, read several opinions, different articles and things as I went to put this together. And anyhow, I ran it through the boss, I mean Angel, and just kind of hitting the cliff notes the other night, and so it passed muster, and here we go. So I'm going to open up in prayer. So dear Heavenly Father, we just thank you, Father, for this opportunity to be here. Father, an opportunity to be in front of these wonderful people and just to share. Father, we just thank you for what you're doing in this church and this body. Father, we just ask that you just not keep it in the four walls, Father, that somebody hearing online, if they're watching tonight, that it will speak to them, the messages that they get through the online viewership. Father, we just ask that you take it outside the four walls. Father, we're going to talk tonight about honor in the workplace, and Father, as I share, I just want your words to come through my mouth, Father, and your thoughts to be shared with the group, just that it'll change something. It'll impact somebody that's here listening online now or in the future. Father, we just thank you, and we just give you all the honor and glory in Jesus' name. So I'm going to start off with the scripture. It's Colossians 3:23, and it says, "Whatever you do, work at it with all your heart, as working for the Lord, not for human masters." And I start with that. It's just really important that we do. I think for me, I've had some jobs that were not really a lot of fun. I didn't have fun doing them. It wasn't necessarily fun work to do. But I've always had this a work ethic that from, I'm sure it's my father, my grandfather, my uncles, the career they had as truck drivers, you're pretty much a one-man show, and a lot of times there is nobody to go back and help you out when something can't be done. And there's nobody to complain to if you don't like it. You're sitting there alone in a truck for hours. But I will say that my dad always had a good attitude. He always had a positive attitude. He didn't always make a lot of money. He didn't have glamorous jobs. He didn't have a new truck, all the time. Ultimately he did. But he started at the bottom, and he worked up to those things. And there were a lot of times where, he'd go so far, and it'd be changing jobs, or the company be bought out, and it'd be like sliding back and starting again. I've been through this before. And I just remember as a kid growing up, my father doing that stuff, and he was never the type. He wasn't active in the church, things like that. But he was always the type that still seemed to have a positive attitude about the stuff. He was not afraid to work hard, and all he was trying to do was provide for his family, and we didn't take family vacations, and it's not because they didn't like us. It's they didn't have the money, but as kids, we never missed that. We didn't feel like something was being left out. And I could always go back in even now, much older, a little bit smarter. I go back and I think about those life lessons, and when you see, and I'll talk later about it, it's not just, what you do, it's how you react to things. And that's something I think really was instilled by my father, when I was little. If you see somebody and you're around people that have a good work ethic, it's going to impact you. It's going to impact you in a positive way. So I'm going to start out little definition because an ode to Pastor Johnny as he breaks down words and where they came from and things and definitions. But so Webster defines honor as a multifaceted concept defined as a keen sense of ethical conduct, a strong moral compass, and the respect or high public esteem a person receives. So there's several things in there. It operates both as an internal character trait and an external social standing. So if you conduct yourself in an honorable manner and you do what you say you're going to do, you do it when you say it, just follow up on the commitments. Don't say it if you don't mean to do it. Don't sugarcoat it. If you can't help somebody move on a weekend, then let them know you're not available to help them move. But don't lead them to believe that you're going to be there and then bail out. Because that's your honor and integrity, your word, and it's got to mean something. And the same thing is just your day to day things that you do as you just go through life and you as a business owner and just things that you do, you people that you meet when you're doing your jobs. People look. We all have this piece in us, this strain through us. We're people watchers. Okay, you go in someplace and you notice if somebody looks differently, it catches your eye. If they're dressed in bright color outfits, it catches your eye, and then you're looking and you're paying attention to them. If somebody's just you go into a situation and somebody some of the stores you go in and there's an employee that's making maybe slightly more than minimum wage, but they're just very helpful. They're kind, they're courteous, and they're very attentive to you as a customer. And yeah, that's part of their job. But you don't see that all the time anymore. But when you do, you make note of it. It's like, man, that guy's really, they greet you when you walk in, and he was very helpful, just really engaged. So we watch people as we interact with them every day, even if here at church, just as you come in, you greet and you see somebody that's, maybe they're off to themselves or they intentionally feel you believe that they're intentionally separating themselves. And, so you see that and you're trying to decide, do I go over and speak to them? Do I say hi? Are they shy? Just what the situation is, and we're always watching people and evaluating. So anyhow, that honor, I love that a strong moral compass and a keen sense of ethical conduct. So many people, I talked a little bit about church. Many people act differently in church than they do those other days of the week that end in day, right? They on Sunday morning or Sunday evening, they come in and they're just, they're super nice and they're friendly and they're greeting people and they're just shaking hands and really, class act, right? And then you go to their workplace on Monday and you would think you got off, sailors got off the ship or something, and you look over and it's like, wow, that's Johnny or Billy or Jimmy or Susie or whatever. It's like you don't even recognize them. They're just the things they're saying or the way they're treating people. You can't do that. We've got to set a standard, kind of a minimum, and always look to improve and to better ourselves and the way we're perceived. It's really important. So I say that, and not because I see anybody in our church doing it or anything, but I used to do that. I admit it. I think we try to fit in sometimes, in the workplace. Everybody else is acting this way, or they're talking about this, and it's okay. It's just a little sin, and I only cussed twice or something, And many years ago, you get into those environments and you let your guard down, and the devil will come right in there and link arms with you. It's like, come on, let's go. And before you know it, you've just, worked yourself down to their level instead of trying to bring people up, to act better. And again, it's not our job to fix other people's problems, or their language and things like that, but we can definitely have an influence in those. So I don't do that anymore. I'm pretty much, take it like it is. If you like me, that's awesome. That's great. And if you don't, next, it's okay. Yeah, I'm not going to lose any sleep over it, is what I'm saying, okay? And I don't mean that in a bad way. It's just, we all have our problems, and you can take yours, and press on. I'm not going to be able to fix it. So, but as I was preparing this, I came across a statement in an article, and it was just talking, and I thought it was kind of interesting that, when you think about it, work has existed since, the beginning, Genesis in the Bible, right? And 2:15, Genesis 2:15, the Lord took the man and placed him in the Garden of Eden to cultivate and keep it. So what do you think Adam's thoughts were at the time that, God says, hey, come here, take care of this garden. It's beautiful. Look at this. It's amazing. And I want you to take care of it. So you think Adam turned around to look to see who he could pawn that work off to? Like, well, you got the wrong guy, because I am not a gardener. That is so below me. God, you've got to have something better for me. You think Adam was thinking anything like that? Or was he, you think maybe he was in a position where he's like, oh my gosh, I have been asked by the Father to take care of this amazing garden. There's nothing more. My father-in-law would have loved that job. I just, as I look over, I just think about it. He loved gardening, but Adam could have had an attitude. It's like, oh man, I'm just a gardener, but he wasn't. He didn't have to apply for the position. He didn't have to compete for it. It's just God's like, come here, I need you to do this. And so work started there. It wasn't a punishment. He didn't say, because I know you're going to sin, I know you're going to fall, I know you're going to screw up, because I already know that. He didn't say that. I'm going to put you busy, and you're just going to do this menial task or labor. It wasn't that. God needed the garden to be tended. And so he assigned, he gave that work to Adam. So I think Adam was probably honored to be asked to do that job. And I think we've sometimes got to look at, even though we might have to apply for a position and compete for them, I think it's really important when we do have those positions that we remember to go back and give thanks to God for the opportunity. And you know what? Sometimes the opportunity just to be considered, to be interviewed for it, even though you might not be successful, you might not have been selected. You can't be bitter about it, because you have no idea what quality that other person that got hired might have taken into the interview that you didn't. And I don't know about you all, but I'm terrible about when I interview. As soon as I walk out, I remember those 4 things that I was really going to bring up. And you're like, oh, if I would have only shared, I was going to talk about this. Man, if I would have thought about that while I was in there, it could have changed things. And it's interesting for me, in my career, every time that I've had those thoughts about I should have, I could have said more, shared more, I could have made myself more marketable for that position, I got the job anyhow. I didn't need any more. I was promoted. Either they took a chance with me, thank you, or they saw something in me that I didn't need to add any extra. So we're probably our hardest critics, right? When we looking for a promotion or a job or something, and when we don't get it, we're harder on ourselves than anybody else. So I believe in honoring the workplace. It's not just about professionalism. I think it's really important to do a really excellent job at whatever it is that you're asked to do. But it's a spiritual matter. And 5 years ago, 10 years ago, longer than that, I don't know that I would have had that same thought, it's really, I am so thankful, for the position and the opportunities I've had. I've been very fortunate. I don't think I've ever, that I can recall, been at a point where I did not have work since I started working. I think I was mowing grass at 13, 14 years old, and I don't think I've ever had a time where I was not working when I could have. And so that's really cool. I've got a guy that works for me now, with recent promotion, and he was looking back in a conversation, we're like 47 years that he's been working since his first job. And as we were just in conversation, I've known him for, I guess, 11 years now. I worked with him as a coworker and now as his manager. But 47 years, and he was going back, and he's like, I've never had a day that I didn't have a job. And he's not a Christian, going to church every Sunday. His mom, was absolutely, she would, if the doors were open, she was in there. And towards the end of her life, if she had to be helped, and she was there. So he knows, and he was raised in church, but he, in his adult life, has not actively participated. But as he was sharing that with me, I didn't say anything, but he shared, and he's like, man, he said, I am just so thankful that I've had my health and opportunities to be able to advance my career and a job to go to, for 47 years. So that's something to go back and look at and think. And it was just awesome for him to think, that he needs to be thankful. It's just hitting him now. He hasn't retired yet. So we'll see. This year might be the year. He's been threatening for 5. But so anyhow, it's not only about being professional. It's a spiritual matter. I think it's got to come from your heart. You've got to, if you went and applied for a position and you don't like it, go work somewhere else. Go put in for something else. It's easier to find a job when you have a job, kind of stuff. But while you're there, do the best you can. I have promoted more people. I've been a manager and a supervisor now. If you don't know, I work for the Postal Service. I've been a supervisor or manager of some capacity for 20 years, 29 years of my 31 in the Postal Service. So I've had people working for me, and I've taken people before, and I've said, hey, come here, I want to talk to you. Are you happy with what you're doing? Would you like to do more? Because I've got a project, and I think you'd be great for this project. And it's not because they were out there trying to, impress me. They were just consistent. They were doing a good job. They had a good attitude. Just all those things that you're looking for as a manager. That's the guy. That's the one right there. Oh, in the dark. It's the other bottom. Turning lights on for the nursery. Yeah. Fine. Lights are out. I'm going home. So. We don't have cookies. We don't have cupcakes. We don't have any singing tonight. So you're stuck with me through the end. I've only got 6 pages. So anyhow, I believe that honor is a spiritual matter. Believers should bring integrity into every meeting, every assignment, every conversation, and every responsibility they have. As believers in Christ, we have a responsibility to act well. We stumble sometimes, and we might stub our toe. Something happens, and we get an attitude and things. But it's really important to keep in mind, why we even have that opportunity at all. And to be thankful for those. So it's not that we're going to be perfect, but we should try to be really good. We should try our best to get better each day as we do that. So God cares about how we act and how we treat people in the workplace. So it's really important, how we speak to people. For me, as a manager now, it's how do I lead people? I can't, it's a federal job, so I can't talk about politics and religion in the workplace and things. I'm not the guy that's going to wear the I Love Jesus shirt and be waiting for people to come up on the street and ask me questions about, tell me about Jesus, tell me about your church and things. But if given the opportunity, then I will share, and even at work. So I can't tell them about, why I think, I have this opportunity and why you don't. I can't share something like that. But if they come and ask me, and I've had it before where somebody come up, there's just something different about I don't know what it is. I can't put my finger on it, but there's something different. And even if they mean it in a negative way, which has happened a few times, I always put the positive on it. It's like, man, I really appreciate that. I try, and I believe that God gives me this opportunity. If you want to know some more, I'll share with you, kind of thing. So I let them open the door, and then I kind of kick it a little bit. And like I said, even if they mean it bad, not that anybody would speak bad about me, but I used to share this with the boys as they were growing up. Always do the right thing. If you just, we're talking about honor in the workplace, and I think kind of a subtitle with that was, honor will bring you favor. It's really important in the workplace and whatever you're doing that you do the best you can. Give it everything you can. Learn what you can through whatever channels it is. Maybe it's just being quiet and watching somebody else, do the same task that you were doing. And if you can learn something that makes it a little better, a little quicker, a little easier, then that's great. Nobody can ever take that away from you, right? But it's really important to do the right thing because it's the right thing to do. And you never know who's watching. And I used to tell the boys, but you always know who's watching. You always know somebody. And so for our sons, Angel, told the boys one year, summer, they're kind of sitting on the couch, school had just gotten out, and she was looking at him, it's like, this ain't going to happen. Y'all are not sitting here all summer. You're going to get a job. And she noticed that the park was hiring referees for, the rec league soccer. And both our boys played select soccer. And she's like, it sounds like you're calling, kind of thing. So she sends them up to the park, and they both got hired, And for our oldest son, it's just doing the right thing. He loved doing it for different reasons than our middle son. Middle son loved doing it because he's kind of in charge, and he had some authority over the game and stuff like that. And he really loved the game of soccer. Our oldest son just really enjoyed the exercise. I can't imagine why anybody wants to run that much. But I digress. But he did a really good job, and he made a really good connection with an individual who was like a regional manager for Honey Baked Ham. And what that soccer refereeing job turned into was an offer. Hey, when this is done, I'd like to put you in a kiosk. Well, then he gets to that kiosk, and he's doing that for a Christmas season in a grocery store. And the store manager comes up and says, hey, what's it take to put you in an apron working for us? And my son's like, an application, So he got a job, and then he advanced really quickly in that position in corporate succession. And all that time, as he was doing those things, in his mind, it was all about me. It was all about him. I'm that good. And he'll tell you that was his mentality, because I'm really good at what I do. I learn things quickly. I'm really good, and I have a good work ethic. And it took several years for him to understand God was positioning him. He wasn't walking with the Lord like he was supposed to or like we wanted. He was rebelling probably more than anything. But he finally realized, finally clicked. They had all these opportunities and all this favor. And it was God positioning. And he shared this last week, and it's not in my notes here, but he shared this last week that, it's been such a turnaround in his life. He's now looking at how he can get engaged in working with some of the married counseling, the groups, sharing some of his stupid decisions that he's made, at a young point in his life. And even, getting involved with the youth, in church, and it's a really good opportunity. It's like, hey, he's not too old that he can still share with them. I remember some of the silly things that's going through your mind right now, and don't do them, and here's the thing. But it's just God positions us, and it's these opportunities. So it's really important how we speak, how we lead, how we follow. Do we take instruction well? Do we take correction well? That's probably the hardest thing, right? Somebody comes over and like you're late. Yeah, I know I was late. Well, it's a problem. Well, then get over it. I mean, I've had people tell me that. Like, well, I'll be late again. All right, we'll talk again. One of us is going to go home at the end of the day and still have a job, and the other one's not, eventually. But it's really important how we receive that as Christians. So anyhow, we're going to look a little bit more today about what it means to honor God and honor people through our work. So the first thing on the notes, the bottom of the first page, is work as a form of worship. And it really is. It's, God gives us these opportunities. And if you put that kind of first in your mind and you think, it doesn't matter what the job is. Like I said, sometimes they're good, sometimes they're not as good. But it's still your job. It's still your responsibility. They're still paying you to do a certain level, a certain amount of work, and a certain quality, right? There's expectations that go along with it. But God gave you this opportunity. And if you want a better one, go be amazing at this one, and I'll share some examples of that later on. But the Bible teaches us that work's not a punishment. Again, God didn't tell Adam, you screwed up or you're going to screw up, so I'm going to make you a gardener. Now, he didn't. He had him tend the garden. It was the most amazing thing on earth at the time. It was the Garden of Eden. It was perfect, right? So before sin entered the world, Adam had responsibilities in the garden. He had work to do. So that existed before the fall, and again, it wasn't punishment afterwards. If he'd have made him a gardener a week later, after he only fell, then it might be a different story, but that's not God's plan. It's not a punishment. When we work with excellence, we're faithful, have faithfulness in our work and integrity, then we glorify God. And again, I've had people come up, it's like, there's something different, what is it? And I'll answer the question based on kind of the situation of what's going on. I might ask them a few more questions so I feel comfortable kind of where I'm going. But I've never had anybody at that point just shut the conversation down and walk away. It's again, they've kind of opened the door. It's what's different. Well, I think what's different is I'm really thankful to have this job. It's not where I want to retire, but this is a good job, and I have an opportunity, and I believe God gave me this position, and here's what I want to do, and here's how I want to act, and it is, some of the people that I work with now have changed. They might have only changed around me, but that's what's important to me. I would love to know that it had an impact on their life and it has just completely turned them around. They start going to church and they're active and things like that. But what I don't want them to do is to come around me and the people that are important to me and then drag us down. So I'll take the small victories and let God work on the rest of it, right? So Colossians again in 3:23 says, whatever you do, work at it with all your heart as if working for the Lord. And I think that's really important. It means that no matter what the job is as a Christian, think of it that you're doing this work for the Lord. It's all, everything, no matter how menial the task seems to be, it's all important. Just thinking of, it just came to me, just thinking of a production line for automotive plant. One of the jobs my father had at a period of time was bringing parts in. And the plant was set up to where it's just-in-time material delivery. So literally, if he was going to be more than an hour late for a delivery, it would mean that they could possibly have to shut down the production line because they wouldn't have the parts that are in his trailer to put on the car. So they literally would back up to a dock, take the stuff off, put it into their system, it'd go through, it'd get to the right place in the line. Every person along that line had a small part to play in putting that car together. And it would be so easy in that kind of a position to just mind-numbing work is what I would describe it as in some cases. And feel like, it's so insignificant. Unless your job is to put lug nuts on the tires, right? Maybe that's all you had to do. Pretty important. I like them. I want 5 or 6, depending. I want them all on there. So I want to make sure that person, regardless of how insignificant that work is, I want them to understand they're still part of this bigger plan to put this car together and have a quality product when it rolls off the end of the line 2 days later. And we have to look at every job that we do. no matter what our career is. We're all part of this bigger process that's going on. Eric.
So that reminds me of one of the World War II books I had read. It's called Helmet for My Pillow, and it's about the Marines march through the Pacific, island hopping, and this one group of Marines, after they had gotten done with the big island battle, and they had like a couple of weeks of downtime at this remote island until they moved on to the next big battle, and they were put on a working party. There's no working party. There ain't no party like a working party in the military, because the working party just don't stop, right? But their job was to scrub fuel barrels. And they scrubbed the fuel barrels, and they were like, this is dumb work. Why are we scrubbing these fuel barrels? So they only did it half-heartedly. And then whenever they moved on to the next battle, which was the Battle of Peleliu, which was an enormous, very hard-fought battle, the Japanese had poisoned all the water, on the island, and so water was shipped to them in barrels. Whenever they got these barrels, the water in these barrels was contaminated with fuel. So the barrels that they were supposed to be scrubbing out and cleaning were the barrels that were going to go to them or somebody else for drinking water. So it's one of those things, you never know what job or what menial task you're doing, the importance of it. Somebody's life can depend on it.
That's a really good example. And it's just so many times, you get frustrated, and it's you feel like you're not, it's just not significant. Like you said, you have no idea, what the end purpose for that is. It's a really good example. Thanks for sharing that. Honor in the workplace begins when we realize that your work, if you look at it as an offering to God, I think it makes a difference. It's like it's part of the plan. We have that opportunity to do this, and you just don't want to do it halfway. Lukewarm, right? What's the Bible say about lukewarm? That you be spat it out, right? So we're not asked to be mediocre at anything. So number 2, honor is revealed through integrity, and I love, I underline the word integrity. It's something that's really important. I think all of us want to have integrity. But then it's interesting how quickly some people how quickly they'll give up their integrity. One bad decision, can really change somebody's opinion, your opinion about somebody. You see it all the time with the, different positions or the movie stars or the politicians, and they might have had a great career, and then they make some ridiculous choice, or decision in their life that then makes you go back and question everything you ever thought or knew about those people, right? They give up their integrity very quickly and easily. So it says here, integrity means doing things right when nobody is watching. Webster's defines integrity as a quality of being honest, having strong moral principles, consistently doing the right thing regardless of whether anyone is watching. And again, as I shared earlier with the boys and raising them, you do the right thing because it's the right thing to do, because you never know who's watching. And you never know, it might lead to your next best opportunity. And in the case of my oldest son, like I said, he just, came along. It's like, how do we get you working for us? And how do we, then he gets into corporate succession at a family grocery store chain, and he moves up through. He didn't know to go apply for those. There wasn't even a position available when that store manager came to him and said, what's it take to get you to work for us? That store manager reached out to corporate office. They created an opening as a produce clerk. My son, Avery, could probably, pumpkin, school and things. It was not his favorite subject, just spelling and stuff. He probably couldn't spell half the vegetables he was putting out there at the time, without going back and thinking about it for a minute. Love you, Avery. But he, here he was, they made a position as a produce clerk, and they literally called and they said, we're going to post this position online because that's what they do. We're going to watch for your application to come in. When it comes in, we're going to close it. So I can't remember exactly, but it was only open like hours. And they had a dozen people apply for this position because there's people out there just waiting for an opportunity to work for this company, for this store. So he didn't even have a position open when he comes over and says, what's it take to get you to work for us? That's God's favor. And it happened because this store manager saw something in this young man and his work ethic and said, you know what? I want him to be part of the team. And back then, our son didn't even know to thank God for that opportunity. And God's like, okay, you're dumb, but I still love you, and I'm going to keep giving you these opportunities. So we have to, we're smarter than that because we're all older than he was. Yep, even Hallie's older than he was. So, so 17 years old, he thought he knew everything. Integrity. It's from the Latin word integer, which means whole or complete. It requires that your actions, your words, and your values perfectly align. And I love that. I used to tell people working for me all the time that a few things, 3 things that you have. Your honor, your knowledge, and your integrity. Nobody can ever take that stuff from you. Once you learn something, unless you just don't use it, you don't do anything, it's yours to keep. That knowledge, it's yours to keep. How you apply it, what you do with it, that's up to you. Your integrity, you have to give that up. Nobody can take it from you. They can accuse you, they can say bad things, but if they're not true, they're not true, and it'll all come out in the end. But if you do something stupid and your integrity is just thrown away, then that's your own fault, but you have to give it up. And then your honor is the same way. Be honorable, do what you say you're going to do when you say you're going to do it, and people will respect that. They'll see it. That's that outward appearance. It's not only inside. So I love that those values have to perfectly align. So I'm going to do a little exercise because you guys look like you're getting a little tired. So I'm going to ask you to raise your hand and keep it up here, if you have ever seen one of these things in your workplace. And I'll let you put your hands down in a minute. But if you've ever seen somebody that's working in the workplace that's cutting corners, raise your hand, okay? How about stretching the truth? Okay, yeah, a few more. And then spreading gossip. I mean, nobody in the workplace would gossip, right? So you've seen that. So far, Angel's the only one that hasn't raised her hand. Checking, so. And then how about taking credit for work they didn't do? So we've seen that. So, yeah. All right. So now put your hand down if any of those apply to you. Wait a minute. Wait a minute. All the hands went down. Oh, no. Just kidding. So, it's just so many of these things, those are just, in my opinion, those are things that are just, again, that's your integrity. That's you're giving that up. If you're doing those things, but it's really easy. We're really quick to see other people's faults, right? It's like, oh, yeah, I mean, they had this simple task. I did this yesterday, and they didn't do near as good a job. I've had people that actually leave their work assignment and go hide somewhere to sleep, okay? I mean, I used to be the manager. I used to be the supervisor. I would search that building high and low. If I went through and I didn't see you on the assignment I gave you, I would search that building. You were now my undivided focus the rest of the evening. My sole purpose in life was to find you. And I carried a Polaroid camera with me. So when I did find you, sleeping on the conveyor belts or, in a storage room covered up with cardboard boxes, I'd get a couple of pictures. One for me, one for the discipline. I'd take one for you, so you'd have a memory of our interactions. But these people, it was real easy for their coworkers to see what they were doing. And then some of these people that I would catch doing this were the same ones that 2 weeks before complaining about somebody else not doing their job. Well, they're never there. I think they're off sleeping somewhere. And it's like, really? Did they tell you their favorite place? Because we find them. So anyhow, it's really important. We should not lower ourselves to do those things as Christians in a workplace. Just have some integrity. Make sure that we're not participating. There's still people that come up and want to talk about somebody else, a coworker, and I will tell people, it's like, yeah, you know what? I don't need to know that. They don't work for me. I don't care what story you have for them and stuff. So you've got to separate yourself from those. We're called to live differently, is what I put in the notes here. So Proverbs 10:9 says that whoever walks in integrity walks securely. And I think it's really important. It's a short scripture, but I think it says a lot in there that, that integrity, it's just, be confident in yourself and what you're doing, and others will see that. We defined honor at the beginning, but honor in the workplace to me really means showing up on time, being trustworthy, refusing dishonesty, and treating others fairly. I've worked with a number of people in 31 years in this federal position, and there's some of the stories that you hear about federal workers are absolutely 100% true. Okay, I've worked with some of those people. I've worked with some other people that I truly felt like working for the federal government was holding them back. There's so much more they could do. They were really, really sharp, really quick to pick things up, had a really good attitude about stuff, and I was like, man, why are you still working here? And there's so much more they could do. I don't know what it was, but in my mind, there was so much more that they were capable of doing. And I felt like working for the federal government was holding them back. If you say you're a Christian, but you cannot be trusted at work, then your witness becomes weak. And again, we are really quick to see when somebody else stubs their toe or messes up on something. We're not so quick to notice when we might be doing the same thing. But just the same as we see and pay attention to what other people do, is that people watchers that we are, people are watching us. Let them see something different, in each of us. People forget, it says people forget your sermons, but they remember your character. So again, I don't preach to the people that I work with, my coworkers and things like that. They know, what I do. But when they ask questions, then I will share with them. But I'm not preaching to them. I'm not trying to convert them. I'm not trying to get them to come to Grace and Truth Church. It'd be great if they did. I'm not trying to get them to support the church or what we're doing. But I will talk to them about my God, and what opportunities I've had. And I love it. Now that we've taken the mission trip, I've got some folks now that is our in, and they're like, have you heard from Georgina, my Peruvian princess, they'll ask about the trip still. And it's a great opportunity to then, share with them, what God's doing, in my life. Because that too, 3 short years ago, you couldn't have convinced me that I would go on a missions trip. So if I was, it would have been going with Angel because I didn't want her going out of the country by herself. She was going with or without me, on a missions field at some point in her life. But your integrity preaches every day. People will see that. They'll become accustomed to it. They'll expect it from you, and it's really a powerful thing. You can say a lot without saying anything, without saying a word at all. Just what they're seeing and make them think, what's different? And maybe they want to do some of what you're doing. Number 3, honor changes how we treat people. Romans 12:10 says that honor one another above yourselves. And it's really important that we treat others well. We have to, I think everybody deserves to be treated with honor and respect, and it's theirs to give up. So if you always start somebody off, instead of questioning their integrity or their honor, it's like somebody has to earn your respect. If you always start out with, I'm going to respect you. I just met you. looked like a decent person. You know what? I just, hey, here's the situation, and I'm going to give you benefit of the doubt. And hopefully we never have a situation where, you do something that causes me to come back. It's like, maybe I was a little too quick. But I think it's really important we treat others, honor one another above ourselves. So if I want people to treat me with respect or honor, then I need to treat them the same way, right? Treat them a little better. The workplace it often rewards competition, just the whole process from even putting an application in for a job, and knowing that you're competing against other people. So as I shared in the beginning, you start second guessing yourself. It's like, well, I should have said, or I should have put this. And, I have a really good example for this after the interview. It's very competitive. It's all about ego and self-promotion. You've got to be, in some places, you have to be really tenacious to get promotion. Pastor Eric has shared many times, he led through his 30 years in the Marine Corps, just favor after favor. And he shared that he wasn't, he was raised Lutheran, but he wasn't actively participating in church and doing all of that stuff. But God still, all the way through his career, he had meritorious promotions. He had recognition. He was always that one that's going to do 10% better than everybody else. He was very competitive for himself. He didn't make everybody else do the stuff that he did. That was just what drove him to be the very best that he could at everything that he did. And he was an extremely competitive, and he's still a little competitive today. Just saying, don't play games, but yeah. Cornhole for him starts like this and ends up like, but it's God will favor your humility. I think that the kingdom of God values the humility and service. So go do the right thing. Eric was, I think, what'd you say? You were 8, 9 years old when you decided you wanted to be a Marine. 8 years old. 8 years old. So he only had to wait 10 years before he could legally join, right? So, yeah. And his dad put him through the ringer in order to do that. And he had a sister, and she was kind of tough too. So, but so this is, I'm using Eric as an example. From 8, he had a plan, he had an idea, and I don't know that it was a word from God in the middle of the night and woke him up and said, Eric, you're going to be a Marine. You're going to be you're going to end up, you're going to go through your whole career, and you're going to be a command sergeant major in 6 different organizations, command sergeant major, 5 different groups. That's pretty amazing. I mean, it's absolutely amazing. Honored, respecting coworkers, appreciating support staff, listening before speaking. Oh, that's a hard one. I'm still working on that. Refusing toxic gossip and treating every person with dignity. So appreciating support staff. One of the most humbling things for me is when I became a maintenance manager many years ago. My position wasn't authorized a secretary, administrative support, anything like that. But I had a clerk that worked in the office, and she had responsibilities. But it was just awesome because from day one, when I came into that position, she took it upon herself. She wanted to serve me. She wanted to make sure, if you drink coffee, I'll bring you a cup of coffee. I'll make your coffee and I'll bring it to you. Well, I don't, but thank you, and I don't need somebody to bring my coffee, But this young lady, Deb was her first name, but she was just, her position was just to serve. And not that it was going to get her anywhere. I wasn't able to give her a promotion or a pay raise or anything. She was a contract employee. She'd get their step increases. There's nothing I could do to necessarily advance her career. directly. But she did it because she respected me and the position that I had, and that was her way of pouring in. As it turns out for her, I left maintenance manager position, and she ended up getting promoted to the secretary, the administrative assistant for the plant manager. So it did ultimately, things that she did for me, just preparing and making sure that I had the stuff I needed as I'd go to meetings and things like that, that was noticed by others above me, the plant manager specifically, and said, okay, well, hey, you're gone. I'm going to take her, and we're going to make her. So it was a promotion, and she did that job until she retired. I didn't ask her to do any of that. I treated her well. I very much appreciated the support that she provided. And I didn't ever have to sit down and shower her with, praise and things. She just, a simple thank you and being courteous that's all she ever expected. Nothing more, nothing less. So treating every person with dignity and respect. Again, it doesn't matter. There's people you'll meet in the workplace that will challenge you, that you don't necessarily get along with. They're just cut from a different cloth. And it's okay. They can be different. They might think the same thing about you. Nobody would ever think that about me. But they might think the same thing. And it's okay. There's a lot of people that you deal with in the workplace that I did put that phone on silent. So I thought I had done better than that. So I apologize for that. But it's really important. You don't have to agree with everyone to honor them and to be respectful. I've worked with a lot of managers that I didn't agree with everything they said. Eric, you've probably worked for a few commanders and things that you didn't necessarily agree. At the end of the day, you still do what you're supposed to do, right? Yeah, I always look at it, the managers above me, they've earned that position. And whether I feel like they were qualified or not, they're still in charge. And they still have decisions to make, and they might ask my opinion, but it doesn't mean they have to do it my way. It's probably better. No, it's not. That would be arrogant. There are some times that I might have a better idea, and I might have experience that would impact their decision, but at the end of the day, it's their decision. They're in that position of authority over me, and I've got to take my rightful position, in the workplace, and I need to be respectful of that. So a lot of times we have that. So we got to honor the position. I had a young captain in the Air Force many years ago that my crew, we were working on a project, and this individual would cross the street and walk down the sidewalk so he wouldn't have to salute, us as we were walking down. In the military, anytime you meet an officer, then you render salute. It's a show of respect for the position. And he used to go across the street, and it offended me. And it just really, it bothered me, because I was hard on my troops, about, being, uniforms always had to be top notch. I wanted them to look good. I wanted them to act good. I wanted them to do the right things, military discipline and things. And they knew it. I didn't have to go through all this stuff. They knew the expectation. And when he would dodge us, I took offense to it. And so one day I go across the street and I render proper salute. Good day, sir. How are you? And he stopped me. And then he starts in, why did you cross the street? And I was talking to him, and I was just like, permission to just speak, and permission granted. And I shared with him, why it bothered me that he would cross the street, because I was trying to instill in these young troops, proper respect for the position and authority. And he said, you have to respect me. And I was like, and I probably shouldn't have said it, but I said, no, sir, I do not. I respect the bars on your collar, but you have to earn my respect. I will salute you every time I see you because of your rank, but I will never respect you from this point forward until you do something to earn it. So later that afternoon, we got to go over to the 06 Colonel's office, my commander, which was awesome. because the commander, had him sit down, had him snap to attention, render salute, at ease, sit down, had him do that about 15 times. And the commander's like, now let's talk about who respects who. You don't like me, but you respect this bird on my collar. And, he had a conversation with that captain about, his conduct, not mine, and afterwards I did get a conversation. But it was, but it wasn't terrible. It wasn't negative. It was like, know your bounds, okay? So stay within them. So I've got a note on here. Jesus honored people. He honored the people in society that everybody else ignored. The poor, the broken, the outcast. Those were the people that were overlooked by everybody else. And Jesus would make his way to them. He would pray for the lepers. He would, just all the things. He looked out for the people that everybody else was like, keep them at arm's reach. We need to do the same thing. We've got to watch out. We've got to make ourselves available to the people that need it the most. They're probably not going to show up in church necessarily unless they see something that's going to draw them in and make them want to come. So in the same way, believers should be known as people who uplift rather than tear down people. And I think it's really important. If your words are hurtful, I think probably everybody's mother, I think it can come into mother handbook, right? If you don't have anything good to say, don't say it. Don't say anything at all. And I think it's really important. And I think there's just, sometimes we need to hear that. If we're not saying something to build somebody up, then we probably don't need to say it. It's not our position to judge people and to tear them down. Sometimes we do that just in kidding, and some people, humor, it's not always taken as humor. They might actually laugh when you say it, but you don't know what they're going through this morning, or this afternoon before you made the comment. And they might really be, like searching themselves, and here you are kind of piling on without knowing it. And you're saying something maybe in jest or in kidding, but if it's not building them up, then don't say it. It's not fun. Again, they might laugh, but it doesn't mean it's fun. It just, maybe they're being courteous. Maybe they really want to throat punch you. Don't chance it. Just if you can't say something good about it, if you're not building them up, maybe we just don't need to say it. Workplace changes when honorable people enter the room. And I don't know if you've ever experienced that where, sometimes you're in a setting and somebody will come in and it's just like, there's just something that you see. You respect them. It's the way they carry themselves. It might be just the way they walk down the aisle, going to find a seat in a meeting. And it's just like, wow, they've really got it together. There's something about them that they see. So we see that same thing. So I often travel with coworkers. Vocabulary is not the best, for them. I don't know, they public school they went to, or the small school they went to, or whatever it was, homeschooled, I don't know, but they have a very small vocabulary, and it's very colorful, and words that I used to get in trouble as a kid if I said them. So, but not long after I started working with my current team, I never told them, do not cuss around me. It makes me uncomfortable. I don't like it. I don't cuss. I don't drink. I don't smoke. I have my biggest thing is I drink Pepsi. So it is what it is. But lots. Angel said, thank you. Yeah, ice cream. I'm there with you, Shirley. But those people, would get together and when we go travel together and we'd sit down for dinner, I never stopped the things that were going on. I would bless my food. I'd bless theirs too, but I would stop. I would bless my food before I eat. So I did that one time by myself. The next time that we get together, as I stopped to pray for my food, everybody stopped, and bowed their head to have their food blessed, and then it was little things like that as they would, say something, and they're getting together and they're talking without me, and they're like, he doesn't cuss. We should not cuss around Art. I never asked them to not do that. I would tell them, what, I don't talk like that, and I would appreciate if you don't also. When they came to me and said, does it make you uncomfortable? They all like to drink craft beer. I don't drink. Personal choice, no reason for it. I just decided 32 years ago, I don't need to drink. I don't care if you have a beer, I don't care if you have a couple. I might care if you go out and you get messed up and then you're driving and you're whatever, you're the fighter the drunk fighter and things. But it doesn't bother me. I tell the guys all the time, I'm your designated walker when we travel. You can have a few drinks if you want to. If you drink too many, I'm your designated walker. You might or might not get back to the correct hotel. Okay, that's all I'm saying. If you're nice to me, I'll take you back to the right one. If not, I'll check you in somewhere else. I'll take you up to room 404. And yeah, we'll see how that goes for you. So I've had an impact on these people without ever trying to change them or their behavior, just because they see that I don't do that. And so they choose not to do that in my presence, the things like that. So again, not because I'm trying, it's just the way it works. And number 4, I think this is a good one. Honor matters most under pressure. So we can all have, really good demeanor, things that we're doing. We handle, success really well. Hey, all the glory to God. Thanksgiving. The true test comes when things aren't going your way. And I have an example of this too, but it's when you're overlooked or when someone else gets promoted, and you do truly feel like, you've done this, you're ready for this, you're prepared, you should have been selected. Somebody else gets it. It's hard to not question that. When you criticize unfairly, you just have a bad day and somebody messes up and you really come down hard on them, as a leader, as a coworker, whatever. That's not good. When leadership disappoints you, I've had that a couple of times in my career. Again, federal government, not always the most qualified person that I have worked for, but they were the boss. It just they disappointed me. Or when stress fills the environment. I worked at a maintenance field on the mail processing equipment. When a machine goes down, they literally each year they produce a sheet that says when machine X goes down, that costs $5,600 an hour in lost productivity. Up to $60,000 an hour for one of the machines. So the pressure's on. The minute that machine stops running, then folks in operations are all over you. Like, how long is it going to be? Shelley, can you fix this machine? And they're wanting to know, how long is it going to take? And so the pressure, and then that's when you start reacting to all of that, and you lose your cool and you say something maybe you shouldn't, or, you react to it in a different way. So those are the times that it really, it's hard to maintain your honor when things are not going well. The more pressure there is in that situation. But your honor should be revealed in those difficult moments. Keep it together. You know what? It's a moment in time. And it might feel like it's hours or days or weeks or months, but it's just a moment in time. This too will pass, right? We can get through it, whatever the situation is. Make decisions, make the best decision you can. Stand behind your decision, press on, and it'll get better. They'll forget. If it's somebody that's yelling at me, I figured they'd go yell at somebody else in a couple hours, and they'll forget all about me. Or maybe not. Maybe they'll be back in a couple hours. But it's happened. David honored Saul even when Saul tried to kill him, right? So twice in 1 Samuel, David, it talks about how David spared Saul's life. And he spared his life refusing to lift his hand against God's anointed leader. He could have, ended his life. He had a couple of opportunities, but he's like, no, God put this guy in charge, and I need to honor, God's decision. It wasn't mine. So those managers that I worked for before and we've all had at some point in our career, that you don't like, somebody appointed them ahead of you, and gave them, they promoted them into that position. Even if you don't like that person, you've got to honor the decision that was made above. And that's what Saul did. He honored God's decision, and he passed on that. Joseph honored God even in prison, think about that. So can't imagine there's much worse that you could be in a situation than that. Daniel remained faithful in a hostile culture. His integrity was so flawless that his devotion to God was the only flaw that they could find. And then they passed law to try and address that, right? So I made the note on here, wow, let me be a Daniel. A while back, Angel was sharing something at home and preparing for a message, and she was talking about Daniel, and I said something about, I can't be a Daniel. And she's like, you can't? Well, sure you can, I mean, you can. You just have to do the same things. You have to act the same way, I mean, he was no different than all of us, right? How he acted and what was captured, that's what's important. And so, let your only flaw be the flaw that you put God first, that you love God so much. Let that be the only thing somebody finds as a negative about you. What a place to be, right? Honor's not weakness. It's strength under control. And sometimes our greatest testimony in workplace is not your talent. It's your attitude during diversity. I pride myself, the last 13 years, I've worked in continuity and preparedness role for the Postal Service. And I used to tell teams throughout the country as I'd stand in front of them for training, emergency management teams, my job was to prepare them to turn chaos into order in short time. So it didn't matter what the situation was. Worst case scenario for the Postal Service was anthrax in the mail stream, and a biohazard detection system was designed and installed. And if that goes off, it's a full evacuation, it's decontamination, it's recalling vehicles. It's 100, 120 items on a checklist that have to happen right now, have to get started. And I tell them it's chaos. But getting frazzled by that is not going to help anything. So the first thing you got to do is, check yourself. It's like, okay, I can do one thing at a time, and then I need to do it well. And so I would tell them it's all about how you react under that pressure. And I used to tell them, as I was their representative in emergency preparedness, and I would tell them that at 3 a.m, when the stuff hits the fan, and you all know what I'm talking about, when that chaos kicks off, if you don't know what to do, call me. You'll probably wake me up, but that's okay. Call me at 3 a.m. and tell me what's going on, and I'll give you 3 or 4 things that you need to do right away to get started. And then I will send you some additional information with the next steps, the checklist that you need to pull up and follow, that you should know where it's at. But I didn't add that. I would tell them, call me at 3 a.m, because we all need a safety blanket sometimes, right? We need a lifeline to call. We can go here, in the Word and find out what we need to do for the situations. There's an answer to every situation in here, right? You might have to dig, and you might have to think about it, you might have to study, but there's an answer to every situation you have. I used to try to be that for these people. At 3 a.m, call me, and I'll tell you what you need to do to get started. It's what I did for a career. I didn't move mail. At the time, I didn't supervise people. I was responsible for me, and I was responsible to educate these teams. So I had a chance to focus on response, where for them, it was an additional duty. It was just something else they had to do at a crisis. And so it didn't come as a second nature to them. So we've got to fill that gap. We have that opportunity with people that we work with to step in and fill the gap. And I think Shiloh, you shared, somebody at work just recently that kind of reached out and was like, oh, I know a lady. I know somebody to talk to. That's awesome. You want to be that somebody that they feel like they can come to and talk to. Excellence is a form of honor. God deserves our very best. The believer should not aim for a minimum effort. We should pursue excellence, not perfection, but excellence. One of the biggest compliments, Pastor Johnny and Jeannie, enjoying their cruise in Alaska, in the waters of Alaska. I think they're on their way to Juneau now. But, one of the biggest compliments Pastor Johnny, Pastor Jeannie had shared with me personally, a long time ago, a year and a half, 2 years ago as we started here, is like everything you do, they saw it as you do with excellence. And it's like, that wasn't what I was trying to do a good job at everything, anything I was asked to do. And they've said that about a lot of different people in church. Wow, what a compliment. When you go back and you think about it, it's like, I was just trying to help you out. I'm just trying to support you. I'm trying to help expand your vision. I'm trying to help Pastor Johnny grow the church, but when you come alongside and you're doing it with all the right reasons and you put God first, and you do it the very best you can, then people see that. And that was a great compliment and a real, esteem builder, it's and not ego. It was like, no, this is great, because I didn't think I was doing anything special, but it meant something to them. And I try to apply that to whatever it is that's asked. If I'm asked to clean the toilets, I might not be super excited about it, but I will go do it. I will do my best. Angel, she's making a note.
What's not to get excited about?
She hasn't written anything down all night, and she's going to write that down. So, excellence says that you care, that you'll be diligent, you're not going to be careless, and you'll be a steward with what God has given you. You might be asked to do something just because, you look like maybe you're the only one there. But a lot of times, I will ask, like I said earlier, I'd ask people, it's like, hey, I got a project for you. There's something, that to do. I'm going to, Hallie's sitting back there, and I know she loves to hear her name, and the spotlight be brought on her. But during the mission trip to Peru, and they talked about doing the electrical for the cabins we were building. And I had shared that I was an electrician in the Air Force. And so I was asked to help with the electrical and stuff. And Hallie was awesome, throughout the whole thing. You couldn't have asked her to do something that she didn't have a great attitude about doing. And so, when they said, well, you can help with the electrical and stuff. And it was great. I was talking to her, and I was talking about how we were going to run this wire and things. And I was trying to explain a little bit farther on, and about kind of why we were running that way. And Hallie, in just the sweetest, soft voice, and she's like, paraphrasing a little bit, and she's like, it's okay. Just tell me what you need me to do. I don't need to know why it works that way, because it wasn't important to her to know that part. But she was awesome with, it's like, we're going to run this across here and drill these holes and do this. And she did exactly, what it was. She knew what she wanted out of it. She wanted to help and do this for these people over there and stuff. But it was so awesome. And I was just like, but I like to tell people why. I like to explain to them why the wires run this way or how this is going to work when it's done. But just as sweet as she could, like, I don't need to know why. Just tell me what you want me to do. And we need that. We need that also. And I didn't push it on her anymore. I was trying to explain electrical theory or anything to her. I knew my place. So anyhow, as when Christians work with excellence, people see the character of God reflected through them. And I believe that in itself is what draws God's favor to you. You put yourself out there, you do a good job, you're kind to people. I think God is going to see that, and I think God gives you other opportunities. Like, no, you're doing really well with this, and I really need, I want to put you over here. And I think for myself, 30 years in the Postal Service, I've been promoted 8 times, 8 different promotions. I have never, not one of those promotions did I ever apply for cold. And by cold, I mean seeing a job posting and be like, I think I'd like to do that. I was a maintenance mechanic working on equipment when I started, and somebody came to me and said, I'd like you to push up as a supervisor, a detail. And then shortly after that, I got promoted to that position, cha-ching, big pay raise. So that was awesome. Not long after that, we get different managers. I worked the midnight shift for years. We get a new manager in, and he comes in, and 3 weeks into it, he brings us in the office, and he says, something different about you, and he's like, here's an opportunity, and I'd like to put you on this detail, higher level pay, and here's what I want to do. I had people come for security control officers like, hey, so-and-so is retiring. We'd like to put you in this position, which then ended up being a promotion into that position. And that has happened time and time and time again. I applied for a position that I didn't get selected, that had posted. And I was fairly disappointed. Not that the person that got it wasn't qualified. She really was. She'd been doing it for the last 18 months. My issue was that nobody else had an opportunity to slot in there and be on equal ground with her, show that we could do it too. So that oversight, that promotion going to somebody else really bothered me. But the next day, the same manager that did not select me called me and says, would you be interested in a detail opportunity to headquarters? So it wasn't going to be in the area and out in the field anymore. Would you be interested in a detail to a higher level position at headquarters? Because there's an opening, and I think you would be good for this. And that was the start of what I'm doing now in writing policy and developing materials for continuity in the Postal Service. And I've been doing that for 13 years. So every one of those promotions came because somebody saw something in me and wanted to give me an opportunity to do something more. And every one of those, of course, resulted in additional pay, better hours. I got to finally leave the midnight shift and sleep like a normal person during the night when it's dark, instead of trying to sleep during the day. But over 30 years, there have been so many opportunities where the position has come to me as opposed to me going out there and searching. And I've thought about leaving the company before. I'm fairly competitive, and I want to promote, and I've thought about leaving the company before because there just didn't seem to be upward mobility in that particular career field. And then, but God, God comes along and says, hey, I think you're done with maintenance for a while. Why don't we move you into this? And then it just took off from there, and a few promotions again. They all required more work or different responsibilities and things. But today, I've been doing this work for about the last 12, 13 years. I now, probably each week I talk with at least one or two of the officers for the headquarters, the 31 organizations that are represented at headquarters. I have the liberty to reach out to them and to communicate with them at that level. I work with those teams. There's a lot of responsibility that comes along with that position, and I have earned the respect from all of these folks, in doing that. And it's not me. It's not me. I'm the same art. I'm a little better, right? Can you agree, Angel, please? I mean, a little more enthusiasm would be awesome, but I'm a little different. I think I'm a better guy than I was, but I'm the same worker that I was 31 years ago when I started with the Postal Service. I believe in doing a good job. I believe in pressing in. Angel, if you'll pay attention, please. Distracting. Shirley.
I was bragging on you.
Oh.
Shirley, excuse you.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, in that case, get the microphone. Thanks, Eric. Eric's got my back. All right. So, yeah. So the next thing here, 6, is honor opens doors to be a good witness. Your workplace is a missions field, and I do think it's an opportunity for us to impact other people. I'm not super excited about Hallie going off to college, I mean, it might as well be across the country, right, Mom? Right? Exactly. It's all the way up in Columbia, but I do believe that Hallie's going to go up there, and she's going to make a difference. People are going to see her, and they're going to know that there's something different about her, and they're not going to expect what she's bringing into the equation. I think she's going to make an impact in people around her. And she doesn't have to have a podium up there and a microphone. She can just be her. And I think people are going to be drawn to her. They're going to see something different, and it's going to make an impact in people's lives. Just by knowing her and just by being around her. So anyhow, it's just it's amazing. Again, I'm not overly excited about her going all the way across the world, but we'll get by. Lindsay will be here. Boone will be here to help you guys too. So if you need a shoulder to cry on, I might have a tear also, but just saying. People watch how you react to things. They watch how you speak about things, about stuff to people. They watch how you do things. They watch how you handle conflict. And it's really important. It's like when the going gets tough, how do you react? And it's just, do you lash out? Do you kind of press back? Are you pretty even keel? And I've been all over the board with that over the years. The last several years, a lot more predictable in what's going to happen. I don't respond. I type email messages with nobody on them, and I'll just let it fly. You're a jackwagon, and this is, but I don't send it to anybody. It's kind of my venting, my own therapy. But I'll kind of put out there, it's like, this is a terrible decision, and you're doing this because, you don't have any experience. And then I'll delete it. And then I'll put the real message together. It's like, what do you need me to do to help you be successful? Because that's my position. I'm not the postmaster general. I don't want the job. So when they decide that we're going to do something, what do you need from me to help this project be successful? And that's our position. That's what we should do. Do it with honor. Let's see. A life of honor creates credibility, and that's really important. Being credible, do what you say you're going to do. Matthew 5:16 says, "Let your light shine before others, that they may see the good deeds and glorify your Father in heaven." So if we are doing it for the right reason, we go back and be thankful for the position that we have, the job that we have to work, regardless of how mundane we might think it is today or petty or menial. We never know how important it is to clean those barrels. We might be the one drinking from them later. It's just really important. But people will see that, and if they see you giving thanks and giving glory to God, then it makes them start thinking. And if they're not believers, then it makes them start questioning, why not? I was just watching a video, and it was talking about, to have the faith of an atheist, that it takes more time and effort to not believe, in a supreme being, in God, than it does to actually just, believe, and it makes you kind of think, and it's just gives yourself an opportunity to share, let people come to you. It's like, what's different? What can I do? What can I do to help you be successful? And it's an opportunity to press in and pour into those people. So let your light shine. I have a little light. Let it shine. I'm not going to sing because I don't sing well, but anyhow. Your conduct may open hearts before your words ever do. How many people have you met in your lifetime where you meet them? Daniel and Shiloh, I'm gonna use the two of you, okay? It's all good though. It's all good. So you guys have been coming here now to Grace and Truth, what, 7-8 weeks? Maybe a little. Okay, so last week of February. So a few months. But there are people that come through the door. And I'll say in your life, in your workplace and things. You two are two of them. When you came through the door, there was something about you. I'm not going to say there was a light behind you or, I didn't see your halos. I can't. Let me rephrase that. Can you edit that part out for me, Michael? There was just something about you. You both looked just very kind, very approachable, friendly. I don't know what your background is, but you guys looked like you had it together, okay? And you still do. How's that? Aren't you glad you dressed the way you did that day? But there are people that you meet in life that you look at, and it's just like you're kind of questioning how close you want to get to those people, and it's like, okay, I'm gonna stay back, arm's reach. So I challenge us all to be this kind of people. Be the Dan and Shiloh, Daniel and Shiloh, sorry. Be the Daniel and Shiloh kind of people where when people see you, it's like, man, I think I want to get to know them. We shared with Hallie when she came out to dinner, loved the time. We'll do it better and I'll have better food. But we shared with her, going on the missions trip that we were a little concerned because we didn't know Hallie, and she was super quiet and things. Man, if she had not gone on our missions trip with us, we totally would have been missing a huge part, because whether she impacted every person there, she did. Anybody that touched base with her, that got to know her, she impacted our team in a way that we would have never expected beforehand. She wasn't quiet, down there. She was very involved and engaged, and she had a great attitude. She, pretty much, it was like anything anybody would ask, when pastor would ask her, what do you want to do? It's like, what do you want me to do? Her role was to say yes. She was going to do whatever she was asked to do, and she was listening, for God, to move. And she came down there as quiet as she was before she went. She made an impact, on everybody there on the team, and very big impact on myself and Angel for sure. So we talked a little bit about the honor, just kind of wrapping up here a little bit. We'll get done a little bit early. We'll open it up to questions. But not that I have answers, but we'll take questions. I'll write them down and research. Honor in the workplace is more about ethics. I think it's discipleship in action. People see you doing a good job, and really putting yourself into the work. It's going to be easier for them to press in a little bit. Some of the jobs, like I said, it seems like it's mindless work, but it is your work, and it's an opportunity. If you don't like it, then press in. Go learn something else. Take a class. Do some online. Ask for opportunities to detail into something else. Express your desire to do something different, to move up, and you will get those opportunities. But if you just sit there every day and you clock in and you complain for 8 hours and then you clock out, you're going to be continuing to do that for a long time, because you're not going to make a difference, and nobody's going to see you. They don't have any reason to look at you and do anything different for you. They can believe that you're just happy in that position. You're okay with doing that. My brother oldest brother is a hard worker, but he works in a factory. Worked in a factory for several years till it closed. He works in a warehouse, pulling orders and stuff. And he's a smart guy, but he doesn't apply himself to anything else. And he's happy. He's happy doing exactly what he's doing. And that's okay. That's cool. We need people like that doing that work also. But he's passed opportunities to move up, to do other things, to be a trainer, to be a supervisor, because he didn't want the hassle that goes along with some of those things, and that's okay. We need people like that too. But if that's not you, then the way to change it is to dig in, and really throw yourself into the work and learn and expand, dig in, apply yourself, show yourself diligent. God's not only watching how loudly we worship in church, he's watching how we answer our emails. I got to think about that one again. Anyhow, how we answer our emails, how we treat our employees, how we respond under pressure, and whether we reflect Christ in our work. It's just, if we look at everything we do as bringing honor to God, then if we're doing that and we put him first, then we can't really mess up too bad, right? Might not be the best, but, then we're kind of open to it. God, tell me what I could do better. And then if we stop using the big hole in the front, use the little ones on the side, we might actually hear God, directing and sharing with us. So it's important to listen and to ask. The worst place is not separate from our ministry. For many believers, it is the ministry field that God has assigned. So somewhere in here, I had a note that the workplace might be the only church, you and the workplace might be the only church these people see. And if you think about that a little bit, it's like, wow, I really I got to act good again. So, I can't do this stuff the way I used to. So work with integrity, lead with humility, serve with excellence. That's really important. Serve with excellence. And I'm gonna pause here on that one for just a minute. In everything you do, and I'm not talking about just in the workplace. Serve with excellence. There are so many things in the kingdom that need to be done. Some of them are not glorious. Sometimes, Pastor Johnny shares the story of, that in a prison cell, and he was telling, one of his cellmates that if I just had an opportunity, I would clean the toilets. If I just had an opportunity. And then he gets an opportunity to do exactly that, hired to do custodial work at the church. And he had that opportunity. And he did it with pleasure. He pressed in. It was exactly what he was asking for. If I could only serve and do this. And then he did it, and he did that well, and he did it with pleasure. And then he got favor, from that. He had other opportunities. That's where he started, but it's not where he finished. He's not done now. Pastor Johnny gets up here, and I'll talk about honor here in a moment, but do it, everything you do it with honor. In the workplace, in the church, in the missions field, do everything you do with honor and putting God first. And you can't go wrong. There might be things you can do better, but you can't go wrong if you're putting God first and you're doing it with a good heart. So I want to take a minute in closing here. I want to thank Pastors Johnny and Jeannie, and I know they're online. Love you guys. Wish you were here, but I know you're not rushing back, enjoying the food and the cruise too much. But I just want to take a moment and I want to honor them. I want to thank them. They even challenge us to step up. And I've got this on here because I wasn't sure I'd remember everything I wanted to say about it. But they have allowed in a short time, the church just turned 3 years old in the beginning of May. And so they've allowed in that short period of time for people to grow in their giftings, and they've given opportunities and things. And that's amazing. Pastor Eric shared an amazing word. The guys and gals at the Veterans Home love it when this guy comes in. They get excited. There's not a lot for them to get excited about, and they love when he comes in to share a word, and he shares with 30 years of Marine Corps experience, and they love the message that he's sharing and then the way that he does it. And that's all because Pastor Johnny calls him up and says, hey, I think you're going to preach. I feel like God's telling me that. And Eric was sharing that last Sunday. I didn't hear that. But I thank you, pastors, for having the confidence to challenge, us in the team, in the church, to stretch ourselves and to grow. I kind of consider myself sometimes to be silly putty, a little bit of comic relief on things. But they have challenged, not only started out with Pastor Jeannie just asking me to do a couple of communion messages kind of off and on with her. And then it was like her off and me on, and then it just didn't change. And it's like, good, keep going. And so she bowed out of the communion messages. I'm keeping track too. But she bowed out and she said, no, you're doing a great job and really like to see, you growing and things. And that was an opportunity. I didn't ask for that. Actually, I was extremely nervous, starting out and doing that. And then you get the little bit of feedback obviously from the pastors, but then other people that it's like, no, that really, that spoke to me today. And that really is an opportunity I didn't ask for. It's pastors giving us an opportunity to grow and stretch. So not only do I have the honor of doing that each Sunday, I'm here tonight, not because I have it all together and I've got it all figured out. Do not believe that at all. If I've misled anybody, I apologize. but they felt like I had something to share. When they asked what anybody would like to speak about in the series as we were doing the family and things, and we talked about honor in the workplace. And actually, Angel and I were going to do that, but we decided to split and let me do this. She's sharing Sunday with her strong suit with the finances, biblical finances. Don't miss it. But on top of all of that, the opportunity is here and sharing with you guys tonight because they felt like I have something to share. And I hope that something that I said impacted somebody tonight and changed your opinion on what you're doing. But they also took a look at the trip to Peru, the missions trip. And we were all, we were excited about going. And then they were like, okay, we have a list of churches. So we need a couple people to share messages. And then we were voluntold. A few of us were voluntold, okay, Eric, you're doing two. Art, you're doing two. Angel, you're doing two. So it just really quickly went from, would you like to share? And I was thinking in my own heart, I'm like you, I wasn't hearing the same thing that they were. But I was thinking, man, I'd love to help, to assist with, or be part of, or maybe tag team. But then, no, it's two messages. And I'm thinking, what do I have to share with the Peruvian people? I can't share, my career, how God has blessed me in the career that I've shared tonight. I can't share, the wealth or how finances have improved for us. We're not wealthy, but how finances have improved for us over the years and how God's been faithful in our finances. Because it doesn't mean if they're in a whole different place. Their per capita income, annual income is $3,000 a year. It's completely different. You talk about that's a pay raise for some people each year in the States. That's what they make in a year. So we're thinking, and stretching, and pastor's just like, you've got it. Just pray about it. You'll have a message. We had a great time down there, everybody. The messages that we shared. And it's because our pastors have the confidence, have the faith, and have the desire to see us grow and push us in places where we don't think, we would fit or be able to do that. You asked me to talk about emergency preparedness or maintenance. I'm all there. I can talk all day long. This has been a challenge to put together, weeks of kind of putting notes together and thoughts, and it's changed 50 times. It's Pastor Johnny can come up here and do this for a day. That's his thing. That's not where I was. So again, thank you for the opportunity with that. I'm honored to serve alongside with the pastors, with Pastor Eric, with the other leaders in the church. We are excited about where Grace and Truth Church is going. I see this as a workplace for us also. And I do hope that what you have seen, from myself as I come in here and I serve in the church, that I hope you see that I'm putting God first. I appreciate the opportunities. I'm thankful for what God's doing in my life and through this church and through our pastors. And I hope that something that I shared tonight has made an impact. So with that, I'm going to close in prayer and then open it up to questions if anybody has anything. Dear Heavenly Father, I just thank you for the opportunity. Father, we had a little fun tonight in sharing, Father, but most important, Father, is that I hope everybody that hears this message tonight just takes away from this if we just put you first in all we do. Father, in the workplace, as we serve in the church, as everything we do, Father, if we just put you first, and then everything else will fall into place. Father, it takes some time for us sometimes to change our way of thinking, and give credit where the credit really belongs. Father, I just ask that you quicken our hearts to make that. Father, to be thankful to you first, and then honorable and work with integrity and excellence in all that we do, that we can bring favor and honor to you. Father, we thank you for the opportunities you've given us in the workplace, Father, and in the church. We just thank you, and we just ask that your blessings keep pouring down on the people of this church and the people that hear this message. We thank you, Father, just ask for safe return of our pastors. The sooner the better. They get back here. And again, we just thank you in Jesus' name.